Hi everyone! So my research was about the impact of gender on adopting reduced meat diets within Generation Z. I'm going to give a brief overview about why I thought it was an important topic to research, my research process, what I found, and why it's relevant to the Sustainable Development Goals. So, a bit of background context to set the scene as to why I think researching reduced meat diets is so important. To clarify, in the context of this research, a reduced meat diet is an umbrella term including vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, and flexitarian diets. Flexitarian diets are a slightly newer construct which you may be familiar with, consisting of a primarily vegetarian diet with occasional incorporation of meat or fish. Continuous growth in human activity and consumption is increasing greenhouse gas levels, which is creating an enhanced greenhouse effect and raising global temperatures. More than 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to global food production, so it really is having a large impact on the climate. Studies conducted have found that animal-based foods, whether that be meat or dairy, cause significantly higher emissions than their plant-based equivalents, and almost 15% of global emissions are reportedly from livestock. Further to this, there's been an increased scientific awareness about possible links between meat consumption and certain types of cancer. So, considering all of these facts, it's unsurprising that there's been an increase in uptake of alternative diets such as vegan and vegetarian, especially amongst Generation Z. However, adoption rate is still pretty low, with only 2 to 3% of people in the UK identifying as vegetarian. Previous research has identified that there is an apparent gender disparity amongst adoption of reduced meat diets, finding that women are much more likely to reduce meat consumption than men. In light of this, I wanted my research to try and understand more about these gender differences in reduced meat diets and to investigate reasons behind them, which is why I chose these 4 research questions. Are there gender differences in motivations behind meat reduction in Gen Z? How do external influences impact motivations to reduce meat consumption in men and women in Gen Z? What are the facilitating factors and the barriers affecting men and women in the uptake of a meat-reducing diet? To conduct this research, I utilised a qualitative approach of 12 semi-structured, in-depth interviews and recruited my interviewees through snowball sampling. I then transcribed and analysed the data using NVivo, a software which enabled me to code and look for themes within my data. So, for my first research question, it was found that women had reduced their meat intake for reasons including personal health, the environment, and ethical reasonings. Men's motivations differed from this, and they showed a strong tendency to be encouraged to reduce meat consumption by the women they had close relationships with, such as family members, female friends, and girlfriends. Looking at external influences on meat consumption, it became clear that friends and family played a great role in both men and women's diets. Women were often encouraged by their other female friends to reduce their meat consumption, but men were not influenced by their male friends to do the same. Social media played a large role for both men and women, particularly in terms of body image, but men associated higher meat consumption with higher protein to build muscle. Women were facilitated to reduce meat consumption by gender expectations regarding them being slim and toned, because these ideals could be met by eating healthy, non-meat foods such as salads. As mentioned before, men were facilitated to reduce their meat consumption by the presence of a strong female influence in their life. However, barriers inhibiting both genders stem from disapproval. The disapproval both genders faced came from men, though the major difference between men and women was that women were able to brush off this disapproval as they had strong internal personal motivations. Further to this, the disapproval men faced for reducing meat consumption reinforced gender stereotypes that they had perceived surrounding masculinity, meat consumption, and attaining a muscular physique. My research gained insight into the reasonings behind the disparity between men and women in reducing meat consumption. Closing this gap and empowering people to be free of societal constraints regarding their diets is extremely important in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. Primarily, achieving gender equality will mean the breaking down of gender expectations, facilitating more men to feel empowered to reducing their meat consumption. This in turn will mean less men disapproving of women for reducing their meat consumption, and thus increase overall levels of people adopting reduced meat diets. Reduced meat consumption will ensure food consumption practices are more sustainable, lowering greenhouse gas emissions associated with food consumption, and thus working towards climate goals. Thank you for listening. All of my references are displayed on the following slides.